But the irony of the situation is I had very much an attitude like, I don't want to do this. This is not interesting to me. I don't want to be here. I have other ideas. And that made the auctioning very authentic, because you see a lot of people put on almost like a used car salesman pitch when they're auctioneering. People would say, oh, it looks like you're just so natural. It's almost like you don't want to be there, but you do. And I think that was perhaps something, that did really help.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
We are live from Laguna Beach, California at the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios today. And I'm really fortunate and excited to bring on today's guest. Just an entrepreneur, an auctioneer, actor, director, you name it. Extremely accomplished. And I'm very grateful to have him on the show. James Pratt, welcome to the show. Thank you for spending time on your weekend. It's very precious. I know your time. And so just to spend a little moment with you I'm really grateful for it. So thanks for joining us today.
Ben, thanks very much for having a conversation, inviting me on. I appreciate it too.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. You're an auctioneer, an award-winning actor and director. And to kick things off, I was hoping when I talked to you that how you could share more about your background and how initially you got into the world of auctioneering. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, the auctioneering side, at the time, it seemed like the opposite way to kickstart a career. Finished high school, studied acting at a great acting school called NIDA. Parents were not really thrilled with the idea. They said, hey, you got to study something at the same time. And I get it, because in Australia, where I grew up, the film industry is not like LA. So there was something to fall back on. So I studied real estate. Fast forward, finished studying both of them, and I found myself in a very, very small country town, needing money to kind of like keep traveling or get through. I took a real estate job because I only thought, look, I have this piece of paper which says I have a diploma in real estate and land economics, but I had the idea that, look, this is going to be the best way to make money rather than just working at a bar or wherever you might think a casual job is. First day I'm there, one of the directors of the office said, oh, we've entered you in an auctioneer competition. Now, keep in mind, I have no idea what an auction really consists of. I have an idea in my head, but it's my first day. You're very green, you're in your very early 20s, so you don't want to, I guess, push it too much in a corporate job. And I ended up winning what's called the NAC division for auctioneering, and went all the way to the final that year for Australia and was the runner-up. And the irony of the thing is at the time I didn't really want to be an auctioneer, but that sort of, I guess you could say, it was helping me with this day job I had. But the irony of the situation is I had very much an attitude like, I don't want to do this. This is not interesting to me. I don't want to be here. I have other ideas. And that made the auctioning very authentic, because you see a lot of people put on almost like a used car salesman pitch when they're auctioneering. People would say, oh, it looks like you're just so natural. It's almost like you don't want to be there, but you do. And I think that was perhaps something, that did really help.
The auctioneering persona is very unique. And is it a muscle you could turn on off to somehow differentiate you? And when did you realize you wanted to be an auctioneer?
So it was right at the end when I won that competition, and I'll set sort of the premise for you a little bit, Ben. So in Australia, if you want to get the highest price for a property, especially luxury real estate, you auction. It's very different in the States, because auctions are often used for distress sales or less prestigious. But in Australia, I mean, you're talking in some of the states, 1,300 auctions happen every weekend. So it's very sort of mainstream. And I kind of started to enjoy the pattern of obviously connecting with people, selling their biggest asset, finding some pretty nice homes, but also this was a skill set that I think I'd sort of unintentionally developed at acting school as well. So it was sort of combining some skill sets that I'd unintentionally learnt.
So what are the key skill sets you need to be an auctioneer? And was it developed from the acting classes you took or just practice? How did that evolve?
Well, I had a great teacher once, and he said pretty much 97% of the work should be done by the listing agent before you go to auction. And so that last 3%, the skills are obviously being the facilitator, exhausting every last cent, knowing how to resell, trial close, project your voice, read the crowd. And then there's the smaller things too. So obviously, you need to know the legalities. Obviously to have a fair understanding when you get a question from left field, such as, a company in Dubai wants to buy it in a company title, and they want to transfer the money on cryptocurrency. Like, how would you handle that? So there's a little bit of that as well mixed in it. But I think overall, the end of the day, it's obviously, like I said, it's the facilitator rather than like an acting job where you're like, hey, it's about the character. It's about the vendor's house and getting the absolute maximum you can, rather than being about yourself.
You brought up a good point. I've been in commercial real estate for 29 years as an owner, a landlord. And whenever we use an auction company, it's always about maybe we have a distressed situation. We're struggling to lease a property. And it's different in Australia. And I was doing the research. I'm glad you brought it up because it seems more mainstream and that it's really a privilege when you could have a great auctioneer auction off your property, because that seems to be a common element that they do down under. Compare to the United States, when people look at an auction, they think, you know what? There's a real opportunity to get a great buy. We use a firm called 10X, which is big in commercial real estate, as you might have heard of them. What's your favorite part of being an auctioneer? And I always want to ask you, do you get excited when the bids get higher and higher, or are you keeping your cool, using your acting ability and focus on performance? How does that work for you?
It's ironic because I think you want to get excited, but I do take it very seriously because you're dealing with, someone's biggest asset, especially in residential real estate. And there's always a story behind it, whether it be it's a sale because of divorce, a sale because something has happened. I mean, there's some incredible stories. I also think the interesting thing, Ben, is there's been times, and I never forget this. This was a very interesting story I had. So working with Sotheby's, and just on that, just because you hit on a really interesting point. So to kind of put things in perspective, the number one agent in Sotheby's network worldwide, he does auctions, and he's in Australia. And that bridge where it was almost like when I came to the States, and this is about 5-6 years ago, and wanted to try and introduce auctions, my calling card for a lot of the Sotheby's offices were, hey, like, Michael Pallier, in Australia, they do obviously the top 10. Well, he does auctions. So there was a little bit of interest from Sotheby's away from that distressed sale, bank foreclosure look, just based on, hey, this is what an agent in Australia is doing to be the number one agent in the whole Sotheby's network. Let's give it a try. So there's a little bit of a window there to kind of creep in and obviously, showcase what it can do. But the original story I was just going to mention is I had an auction with Sotheby's, and I'll never forget this. I had a reserve of 6 million, sold the property for 8 at auction because there was just people going an extra 250,000, extra 250, an extra 1,000, whatever it was. But we got to 8 million. And I remember the owner, I met him just after the auction because it had been quite a rush to get it to auction. And he shook my hand. He said, good job, and walked away. And okay, so that's a guy who woke up one morning wanting 6 million, and we get 8 million, and his reaction is a kind of like a smile, like, I'll just shake your hand, thanks. And I remember earlier that week I'd had an auction where I'd had this young couple, and they had a $450,000 property, and they were so ecstatic that we were able to get 475. And it was like, oh, you can come to dinner anytime. Let me know. Almost that thing where if your car broke down at night, they would be the ones to call. But I thought that was interesting. You got someone that makes $2 million and they can't crack a smile, and you have someone that makes 25,000 and your best friend. So you see a little bit of everything in the job as well.
Yeah, human nature is something else, huh? I mean, obviously the 2 million profit guy. Probably were his expectations, but it's also leans into gratitude, and some people just get it and are appreciative of the people involved in life and the value, and some people don't even get it. And you're going to go through that, especially in real estate. I see, it's the same thing with our investors. You can make them huge profit, great IRR, and it's always about the next deal. You can never enjoy the win, so to speak. So I always tell everyone out there is that enjoy the wins in your life. So for example, a win for me is spending time with you today. That's a win. Enjoying our company. That's a win. And I think a lot of people, James, have trouble enjoying wins in life and taking a step back and being grateful for it. You've sold a lot of goods for the rich and famous. What are some of your favorite stories from celebrity homes and items you sold? And is there any fun celebrity stories you can share, or other stories are insane that the insanely rich do crazy things? Like, what are some things you could share?
I think as well, Ben, anytime selling a celebrity property tends to be a headache where you bounce between the publicist, the agent, or the business they put either a business or accountant in front of it. And then actually getting through to the person who owns the property, whether they be a musician, actor, writer, whatever they are successful in, it tends to be this dance, because you have the publicist who gets all excited with headlines but doesn't want any of the negative ones. You have the business person where it's like, are you telling your client, listen, I know your client wants 15 million for their home in Bel Air, but right now the market is it's a 10 mil market at tops. So I feel like you play that dance often with celebrity homes. The interesting thing I do find, though, when selling celebrity homes, is that there's always a pattern. There's always a lot of security. They're usually very private, and often less natural light. They're more kind of secluded compounds. Not in a sort of, I guess, compound may be a strong word, but they're not the traditional open plan, light filled, top to floor, glass to floor ceilings that you can pick up in Malibu. They often have a lot more of the, the privacy aspect. And so often they're harder to sell, because the average buyer says, yeah, I don't need $500,000 worth of security camera, especially, where I'm at in my life. Or like I mentioned, the design of the home is often, it's for the celebrity and that secluded privacy, rather than someone that says, hey, like I live on Malibu on the PCH, and when I open the blinds in the morning, like I want to look down onto the beach. So there's a few factors that sort of come in. And then there's also just the side of it where I think with a celebrity home, you have a enormous benefit if you can tap into this correctly, which is the marketing side. And I think that's where, if you're a real estate, if you're a realtor or a developer, someone who's wanting to access what's the best thing you can get out of selling a home, well, it's the marketing. Because if you're smart about it, you could do a press release before the property comes on the market, announcing it. Obviously, that person or that personality's fans will click on it. You can pepper it so that you can try and find another one. And then when it sells, obviously you're the hero. Try doing that with just a regular person who's got a nice home. No one's going to care if you put out a press release that person's selling. So I do think that I guess the public profile figure, marketing wise, is your best thing to get out of it.
So you have a bunch of records for the largest sale. And I'm curious, how do you prepare for each auction? Is there a routine you go through? How much work happens before the auction versus when it's actually going on live for you? Walk me through, give me an inside look, James, of what you go through before you prepare.
That's a good question. And I'll try and keep it as, let's just say, common as they happen, because there's a lot of left of field. But often the start of the auction will be the property's signed up and there's an auction campaign. Auctions are traditionally, to get the best for a real estate property, you need at least 3 to 4 weeks for a campaign. You don't want to sort of drag it on any longer than 5. But the point of the 3 to 4 weeks is you have a cutoff date. So let's say you and I were driving down the PCH, we see a property in Malibu and it says for sale, and we see exactly the same house that says auction next Tuesday night, 6 p.m. The cutoff date does provide that urgency. It's like if one person has only one time to see one property, or they've got to get their finances or call their attorney, they're going to act to make sure they do it before the cutoff date. So let's say we've got the 4-week campaign, list the property. Then from when it's listed, there is quite a few meetings with the vendors, obviously setting expectations, what to expect. And that information between signing the property up and auction day should be relayed to the vendor effectively. So that's a great point where you can start the emotional, I wouldn't say education, but just the point where you're allowing the vendor to see where the market's at week 1, where the market's at week 2, where the market's at week 3, and by week 4 when the auction happens, the reserve they set is based on what market conditions are, rather than listing a property saying, hey, we're going to have an auction in 4 weeks, this is the reserve now in 4 weeks, and by the time we get there, because there's a lot of, like we might list a property for 5 million on, and I keep saying the PCH, let's go with that, but the PCH, we might list that in Malibu for 5 million. And in week 1, everyone is saying 4 million. And week 2, everyone's saying 3.5 to 4, 4 and 4. You want to have that so the vendor sets a reserve at 4 million rather than just listing it for 5 and then suddenly at 5 million, that's, it's not a successful campaign. But the real work is done. Let's say, and I'll give you an example. Let's say tomorrow there's an auction at 7 p.m. in room. So it's at one of the, let's say it's an in-room auction, wherever you want to say it is. The process that goes there, are we going to live stream it, or are we going to have it just invite only? Getting all the documentation. Usually there is, if there's an open house on the day, there's an opportunity for people to see the property one more time. And then the auction itself. Look, the auction, it's depending on the locale, but it might be 2 to 3 minutes of a legal preamble and then starting the auction, or it could be 5 to 8 minutes starting, and then we start the auction. And then to finish it all off, if we don't sell the property on the day, if you've got people in a room or if you've got people at a property and the auction doesn't sell, well, guess what? The buying temperature is extremely hot because they've come, they've registered, they have their check. So that's when the negotiation happens to try and get a deal done as well.
Do you have a certain auction voice you turn into, like from your acting days? Is it like an American English accent? Do you go Australian? Is like one of your favorite actors, you start mocking him from the auction? I mean, what's your call like?
It's a really good question because it's kind of like not a one size fits all with auctioneers, especially in the real estate space. My strategy has always been, it's the biggest asset. It's not about you, James, whatever you can do to get the most. So perhaps I might be a little serious. I know some auctioneers do. They do tend to sometimes mix it up. Unfortunately, I'm going to say, Ben, when you have a very bread and butter market, you do find some real estate auctions have corny jokes, like, I don't know, there's no bidding. Someone might say, I told you it was a quiet area, or someone, the reserves 500,000 and someone puts a bid in at 20,000. Someone say, sir, that won't even buy you the letterbox. I tend to stick a little bit more, I would say, on the I'll smile a bit more after the auction, after we've got every last cent, rather than test out my stand-up.
So as much as you're comfortable sharing this, what are the economics for the auctioneer business and who are the players involved?
And just to sort of break that question down, do you mean what are the financials from the auction?
Yeah, like how does a typical auctioneer business work? I mean, what are you allowed to charge? How does it work if you're selling a home? And let's say in residential real estate, I don't dabble too much in it except for my own residential properties I might live in. they might take 6 or 5% of that. How does it work in an auction? What are those economics?
That's a great question because it really it's based on the area. So, for example, back in Australia, because it is done such a common way, I would say 99% of the time, the auction house charges an upfront fee, and that is whether the property sells prior, doesn't sell, but it's basically for their time booking the auction in. And a lot of people sometimes can get on an auction company can get on a very successful business model because you might get, let's just say you get 200 properties go to auction that month, and 70 of them sell prior. You've already been cut a check for those 70, literally, for just booking them in. Where you make that up is obviously, like I mentioned, you sell a property for 8 million and the reserve was 6. People would look at that and think, well, imagine if you had a cut of the commission, that would have been far better use for your time. So it makes itself up a little. In the States, because the commissions are a lot higher, you can negotiate a commission far more easier. So it's a cut of the commission plus an upfront fee for in the States. In Europe, it's very similar. You take a fee up front and then there's a cut of the commission. Unfortunately, in Australia, it's just the upfront fee. But surprisingly, just to put it into perspective, so if you sell a property as a broker in Australia, I mean, look, Sydney, Melbourne, the main capital cities, I mean, your broker fee is going to be maybe 1.5%, maybe even 2%. To put in perspective, you sell in California, it's like 3% for the listing, 3% for the selling. Selling and listing agent splits 6%. There's just such a greater range for the actual broker themselves to sort of bring you in.
Do the brokers take a co-op fee if you're auctioning it where it's because they're representing their client up front in the auction? Do they tell you that they have to represent that? How does that work during an auction?
So most of the time there is, so for example, the contracts will all say, for example, with Sotheby's, a Sotheby's agent will either have a lead on a property or a property, and they'll say, hey, we want to partner with you to have this as an auction campaign. So you partner with that agent to sell the home throughout the campaign. And that's where you get to see a lot of, I guess, good and bad real estate, because you get a chance to go into their business and see they operate. And I mean, again, that's a story in itself, but let's just say just because someone has a, very expensive car and a nice suit doesn't mean that they know how to sell your home.
So do you have a little bit of the bug where how much real estate investing do you do? And what do you invest in any non-traditional items that you sell, like paintings, jewelry, etc.? Like where do you put your capital into?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I'm not sure whether you've ever looked at this. I have done the commercial, the residential, and most recently I've been looking at land, which I'll be upfront with you. I don't have a great deal of experience, working farms, and also the opportunity to buy large parcels of land and looking how you can put carbon credits into that. I mean, there's a friend of mine, he got me onto that, and he's made that work very successfully with the carbon credits, but there's a little more pieces to it. And the land side that I've been looking into is just, I think perhaps during COVID, there might have been a lot more press where people have been stressing the emphasis, but also looking at that business model where if the world's consistently shifting to more virtual living, virtual working, it's going to be about lifestyle where they live. Like if you don't have to live right in the middle of Manhattan for your job, where could you get better value for money? Could you live on the beach in the Bahamas and still get the same job? Looking at pockets of land that would be ideal for lifestyle living, and in an emerging market where people want to move out of cities to have that. So that's another research plan that I've got to invest in later in the year too.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Ari Rastegar from Austin, Texas, was on the show. And that's what they do. They build these communities where it's one-stop shop. Your whole lifestyle is in the community where you live. The grocery store, the activities, all your amenities, And it's all based on technology too, where you just walk around with a card or a fob and you could just pay for things without carrying cash. And so it seems like that's a growing need. Let's switch gears. I love real estate. I'm a huge commercial real estate guy. I've been doing it for almost 3 decades. I could talk about it all day with you. I get excited, but you have so much more to unpack in your story. And I believe you did the first NFT crypto auction of its kind, which was to me just absolutely fascinating. What was the experience like for you? And what was that one off, or is it a one off, or is there more to come? Is this more going to be a common practice for you? Like, walk me through like that experience for you.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you would have seen some of the videos online. Yeah, I'll give you a bit of reference just from that. So, long story short, uh, end of 2018 was up in Vancouver with some of the top brokers there. Lisa's son, Malcolm Hasman, he owns Angel Hasman, and you obviously, there's networking that goes on when you're dealing with people that have a lot of, let's just say, high end property. When someone who has, say, a 20-30 million dollar property says, hey, I'll introduce you to this person, 9 times out of 10 that person is somebody that's either top of their field or doing something. And I was very lucky in Vancouver to get introduced to someone that said, hey, like, do you think you could talk to these people back in Australia about doing a cryptocurrency auction? And at the time, it was like crypto was that thing where people have that glazed eye in their look when you say cryptocurrency. It was not so mainstream. But the moving pieces were, we had a luxury property on the New South Wales Queensland border. It hadn't sold. The owner was really keen to explore how they could get better offers in. It was quite a futuristic home. So we partnered with a company called New Yen, which was an exchange for crypto at the time. And we looked at it like this. If you're going to have an auction and you're going to get, let's say, cash buyers from around the world, you're going to get them traditionally either buying or not buying, but they're going to buy with cash. If you could open it up to the crypto market, you then have places like China, the United States, through Europe, there's a lot of crypto. What else can they buy with their crypto? They can basically trade it and that's it. So being able to buy a big tangible asset would be just a whole new market for real estate if it works. Because again, there's moving pieces and you don't want to say you can do something and then on auction day it doesn't work. So what we did is, we ran this auction and I've got to say, Ben, the results were phenomenal. And at that particular point in my life, I wasn't really super down with crypto. I knew what it was, but I hadn't dipped my toes in it. By the end of it, I was like, this has really got legs. And I'll tell you why, because during that auction, the amount of people from around the world that reached out to either, and we're talking people in government as well, that you'd think would have no interest at all in a real estate auction for 4 million using crypto. People saying, hey, can you let my office know what happens with this? There was just a huge push. So there was a very big groundswell. And I mean, to sum up your question, we did the auction like a traditional auction, opening it up for people to be able to bid in Binance Coin, Bitcoin, or you could also bid at the same time in cash. So all of a sudden we had 3 more buyer pools than just the one.
I do have a question about that though. I always
Sure.
wondered, with crypto, it's like a commodity. I mean, it's moving all the time in price. How does that work? If say the property is worth 4 million, okay, and that's where you land in your auction, is the currency converted before the auction, or how does that work? Because we looked at it for commercial real estate and we said, this is the frontier where we're going to have investors coming in our fund and they're going to say, hey, Ben, and to our leadership team, can you come in with crypto? And I was saying internally, I'm like, how would we ever do that? And so walk me through, how does that work? Because that to me is fascinating, with a moving currency and locking it in. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question, because that was one of the questions that early on when we were piecing this together, how would it work? I guess you could say we run the auction, and whether the person's bought in Binance, Bitcoin, and let's just assume they didn't pay cash. So straight after the auction, once that sale price has been agreed, that's when we had Trigon Trading to provide the transfer into cash. So let's say we buy it for 400 Bitcoin. It's okay, property sold within minutes after the property is sold. Whatever that Bitcoin is holding at that particular point is then converted into cash, and then the sale goes through in cash. Because essentially the vendor doesn't, I would say in my experience, I would say 95% of the time doesn't want to be paid in crypto. They want to be paid in cash because that was the traditional route they're going with auction. So if they can get a bidder who bids in Bitcoin and then just, cash that out, then straight after the auction, then they know they're set for when they get that money, and it's gone through escrow or it's gone through the banking system.
So the trading company is handling, saying, okay, here's the price. At the time the money gets transferred, it's this much Bitcoin you need to deposit into our account, and then it's locked in. And so it will go to, if it's Australian dollar, US dollar, whatever currency. So basically you need a middleman trader to handle the exchange of funds to convert it.
Exactly right. So how we did this particular auction is almost like a beta testing. Is, we ran the auction, got all the auction done. We had Nuyen, which was a very advanced sort of blockchain company to handle any smart contracts we needed. But the actual payout, or let's say transferring from Bitcoin into cash, was done by Trigon Trading. So and to be very fair, it was very smooth as far as sell the property, transfer the Bitcoin or Bitcoin into that AUD equivalent, and the owner knows he's got the cash 2 minutes after the auction. The difference is, and this was the real takeaway from it, so the auction had, and again, just sort of putting things in perspective, it had probably market value. It had 1 to 2 cash buyers. We had over 5 registered. So the other people registered were bidding in Binance Coin and in Bitcoin. So if you strip back, we didn't offer the option of crypto, then it was just going to be a cash auction, 1 to 2 buyers bidding against each other. How far does that go? Well, if one doesn't bid, then there's not going to be much of a rise. So it was introducing this whole new buyer pool, but also the marketing was just the real point of difference that I saw.
Let's get into the artistic side of you.
Sure.
Your other half of James Pratt, as we would say. So you've been recognized as an actor and a director. So what projects are you working on right now, as we speak?
So, and I'll put this into perspective so people sort of understand. LA, Ben. It's very hard to not do more than one thing while you're in LA. There's so many opportunities for business. So to kind of put things into perspective where I'm up to, I just finished associate producer on a film called The Forest Hills, which is a thriller horror. Ed Furlong, Shelley Duvall. That comes out in the next month or so. End of last year, I made this Dumb and Dumber comedy called Malibu Crush. It was basically Dumb and Dumber. And that got released worldwide, which was really nice. And coming up, looking to pull the trigger or just confirm another feature film that is coming up, which is a thriller shooting in Lake Los Angeles. It's called Skyline Mist. And the other side of that, just to sort of put things in, is day job is producing films with Mogul Productions as well. Another day job. Mogul's film Dreamer won the Mammoth Film Festival last month with Diego Carver and Jason Patrick. So there's been fantastic, real estate / film life experience I've got recently.
Congratulations for that. Let's kind of frame this a little bit. So you got the auctioneering, Yeah, acting and directing. How do you prioritize your time? Because time is all you have in life. It's your most valuable asset. How do you prioritize your time between acting, directing, auctioneering, and living your life as well? How does that work for you?
I've got used to delegating.
Okay.
That's probably been the simplest answer. But also just I'll be upfront with you, Ben. You said something earlier in the show, which is, life is short. Like, I think just what is making you happy, really pursue. You find the energy and the time to do that. If you're just doing something simply because it's going to bring in some money, I think you're easier to get off the clock. You're happy just to stop at 5 and say, hey, now I'll do something just to recover from the week. So prioritizing, delegating, and enjoying what I'm doing, I think, is the secret.
No, it's so well said. It's the absolute truth. You have to love what you're doing on a daily basis to stay consistent, be persistent, and create that success and really that lifestyle that you're looking for. So you recently moved from Australia to LA. How's that move been for you so far? And is LA unlocking new doors for you now that you're moving here?
It's funny because I'm laughing because the big thing in Los Angeles, I think, is if you're prepared to work really hard, there's the rewards there. I mean, everyone sort of talks about the hustle, and it's got that New York side, which I absolutely love. Australia is a slightly different beast. Australia, I'll be upfront with you. Look, you have medical, you've got free healthcare, you've got beautiful beaches. It's very easy to become middle class there because there's a support system. So, I mean, if you go bankrupt in America and maybe your lowest hanging fruit is, and this is no mean a bad thing, but like your lowest, your way to get out of bankrupt is working at Burger King, being paid $7 an hour is going to be really tricky to kind of get back to where you were. In Australia, I mean, you work at a cafe and on a Sunday and it's $28 an hour, just as the minimum wage. So I think in Australia, there's a little bit less of that. People are pushing and they're more happy to kind of slot into sort of a middle class side. So I love LA. I love the hustle. I absolutely love the fact that you have people that are 20 years old or 60 years old and they're going for it. And I've said this story before, and I'll say it very quickly just because I think you'll really enjoy it. But a couple of years ago, I was in Glendale getting an Uber late at night at like 2 a.m. This 61-year-old lady picked me up. We got talking and she was just fire. She was amazing. She said, I'm driving Uber and I'm nearly finished. I've been driving it to save up enough money to start my own catering business. And that's been my lifelong dream. And I kind of probed a bit, it's 2 a.m, you're having a nice conversation going back to Beverly Hills. There's not any traffic. It's a really smooth conversation. And she said, look, I can't drive in the day because it's busy. Like it's too hectic for someone my age. So I drive at night. And I was thinking, wow, you're persistent. And that's so inspiring because at night, that's when you get, the shady stories come out. And obviously you're going to have a different clientele. Anyway, and she's really excited. She's like, every month I reward myself. This month I've got my website up. Last month I got my business cards. Anyway, long story short, I remember I looked her up. It would have been at least 4 years after that because it suddenly came to my mind. And I went on her website and she had like over 150 employees.
Wow.
She had this huge catering business in California. She's 66 years old, like started at 61. And I remember under her bio, because I clicked on, because I want to make sure this is the same lady. Like I haven't just, this is like a same name, different company.
Uh-huh.
I click on it and this lady's bio, all it says is catering is my passion. And I was like, you could have put in there, like, you started at 61, you've grown this yourself, like just completely just name dropped and done that whole, it's all about me. Even in success, she's still actually just as humble as ever. Like catering is my passion, and people don't know her story, but I was just blown away by that.
It's so true. It's when you love something, you can really commit to it. And that's what success is in life, whether it's personal or business. You have to be committed And it's a very tough concept, James, for people to understand what commitment means. One of my dear colleagues, I was up in Los Angeles. I came from the OC to go see him, and he had a cold plunge in his backyard. And he said, "All right, Ben, come here." He goes, "Take off your shirt." And I looked at him. I go, "Are you asking me to go in?" He goes, "No, eventually you will when you come back. But I want you to take off your shirt so you can put your arms in up to your shoulders in this 35-degree water." He goes, "I want to see what commitment looks for you." And he says, "No one's ever gotten past a minute." So I went a minute and a half,
Oh,
and
that's great.
and it was because your mind is playing tricks on you and being committed. And what's so interesting about your story with this lady is that she had her passion. She was committed. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her otherwise. She can't get this done and create a successful business. That's what's so amazing about human beings, is that if you really put your mind to it and be committed, you can achieve anything. You're a perfect example. Look, you're an auctioneer, you're an actor, director, and I'm sure there's moments that you've gone through where you started questioning yourself and saying, "Am I good enough? Am I the right person? Can I do this?" Is a total different industry than the auctioneer business. And you go out there and you do it. And that's what it's about. And so I commend you. I think it's a wonderful skill to have. And you have to tip your hat to that lady, because that's what it's about. I mean, I love those stories. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
No, I was going to say same reaction with myself. I mean, you talk about LA, and there's a lot of bad habits in LA and a lot of fake people, but you meet someone like that and you realize, that is the definition of success, and that's why you get inspired.
Absolutely. So the name of the show, James, is I Own It. It's owning every aspect of your life, being responsible. And that's why I wanted you on the show. We're all works in progress, as I'm sure you know. Can you share a recent example where you realized you had it wrong and you didn't own it fully?
Yeah, I recently started a company. Um, I mean, one of the things I love to do is I have this saying: you put $10 in, you get $10 out. And it came to me from an athlete that I in the NFL that had put it in. He was referring to training. Like, you go to training, you put $10 in. Sure, you leave as soon as training's over. Guess what? Like, you'll play, your contract will expire. That's it. But you stay over time. You put $1,000 in training every time, and guess what? You're going to get a bigger contract. You're going to get more responsibility. And it's the same thing where with life, it's like, okay, well, there's an opportunity. I'd love to I'd love to start a different business, and I sometimes do that. I look for ways with a business partner. What's in aviation? This might work with our network, but I had this one business. I said, I'm just going to go for it. You invest time and capital, and it didn't quite work. It didn't work. After 3.5 months, it was this thing where I was like, hey, this hasn't gone to plan. This is a business within media, within publicity. It hasn't quite have clicked what we wanted. And at the time, I was more frustrated. With what I hadn't got than actually realizing what I had got, which is, yeah, like, it hadn't been what I wanted to do, but the clients that had been brought up in that 3 months, they're still there. Like, there's still a network that you've got, and the learning. And so, to kind of summarize, originally, yeah, I wasn't in a great confident mental state for about a week. I was thinking, this has been a disaster. And then you realize, looking at it from a different perspective, this is perfect. You go again, you know what you do differently, or you've now collected more information, education to go again. So that's probably the most recent time when I've tried to put $1,000 in, and I thought I've got $10 out, but actually I've got the $1,000 out. It just hasn't been the outcome that I was looking for.
Oh, so well said. Well said. What is the best way for our audience and everyone to follow you and engage with you?
If you've got any real estate questions, anything at all you'd love to hear, even just how would an auction work? What's a good auction? Look, even if you're like, look, I'm thinking of selling in Florida, what's a good auction company there? Please, James at jamesprattauctions.com. Anyone in LA on the film side, just reach out. I think I'll give you my personal one on here, Ben. Just prattfilms at gmail.com.
Nice.
That's probably the best way if you want to reach out.
That's great. We're going to wrap up with our 3 questions. I've been waiting for you to come on. And by the way, if you ever come down to Laguna Beach, you are always welcome to come in studio. I think you would be spectacular, and we could have multiple episodes with you. So in our studio, we have a couch. I would say, James, go on the couch, lay down, close your eyes. How old are you now?
36.
Okay, you're 36. So you've been through a lot of experience. You've been through a lot of real estate deals, acting, directing. Diversification is in your life. And I say at the ripe age of 36 years old, you close your eyes and you can look back when you were 16 years old, 20 years ago. Knowing what you know now and having all this experience and going through different experiences in business and life, what would you share with your 16-year-old self to help yourself when you were younger?
It sounds very, very simple, but I think enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Enjoy the ride, because you said something earlier, which is you realize you don't have time. When you're 16, 17, early 20s, time, you just think you have the world.
Yeah.
Right now, it's like I would be thrilled if I could get an afternoon off. So yeah, enjoy the ride. You have time. Take
Yeah.
it all in.
Well said. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you look back and life is like a treadmill. It's like going underneath your feet and it just passes you by. So you got to
Yeah.
be very mindful of your time. I absolutely agree. So it's our last day on earth. God forbid. It's just me and you. And it's our last meal together. Your choice, James. What are we eating and what are we drinking?
uh, you know, I would definitely say a bourbon and Coke.
Okay.
That's what we're drinking.
All right.
Uh,
Might as well go out hammered.
well, I'm thinking, look, it's not a time to celebrate if we're going out with some champagne. So I'm thinking it's probably a good, a good drink, sort of middle ground. What are we eating? Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, are we eating? Because it's sort of the world's the
Yeah,
world's coming. I tell you what.
that's the question.
Yeah, I tell you what. You know what? A good pizza. A
A good
good
pizza.
pizza.
Oh, you're talking to a Chicago boy. You don't have to tell
Yeah,
me.
I was thinking East Coast as well.
Coast, coast,
Sparrows.
I
Yes.
could do a New York. I could do a New York pie. I'm all for that. Either way, I love.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. What's your favorite kind of pizza? What do you put on your pizza so I know what I have to rock with you?
I love the pepperoni.
Okay.
I mean, there's different variations. Some
Yeah.
people, pepper it around, but if it starts with pepperoni, I'm usually good to go.
Okay. I could do
Yeah.
that. That's cool. So in our studio, we have a grand piano. We have a drum set and electric guitars. If you're in studio with me in Laguna Beach and we could have any musician or band walk through the door, they could be living or deceased. It's your choice, James. Who's coming in studio to play us a song, and what song are they playing us?
Ooh, um, that's a very good question, because if you can only choose one, you're almost looking. I mean, look, my chain reaction is, I'm not going to lie to you. Uh, I'll tell you what, I'd probably do one of the Beatles.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why, because I think today, you can be a YouTuber and you can play guitar, have a great voice, and then you just take off and record label, and that's a musician. I would love to see an old school musician, to see, yeah, see what your chops are, because it looks to me, it's all the research, and it is, back then, to be that big, you would have had to have some sort of talent, regardless of, who your publicist is or what your YouTube channel is. What does raw talent look like? And get inspired by that.
Is there one Beatle you gravitate to that would you lean into?
Well, I won't lie to you. It's probably not my favorite band, but I think for someone that's got for a group that's got that much hype, um, you know, I guess, I mean, Paul, Ringo, probably, probably Paul McCartney. Then he's still
Nice.
to
Is there
see.
Is there a certain song you'd want him to play for us?
Not really.
Okay.
No, I just wanna see them play. I wanna see what that hype is. I wanna see what that non non-PR repped, just natural talent, what was the big hype about?
So we would just say, "Hey, go ahead and play a song for us," and he would just go.
We'll say, "Hey, I want you to play your favorite song," to
That's
see
right.
the passion, to see that passion, yeah.
That'd be fabulous. James Pratt, thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in listening to more episodes like this one we just dropped with James Pratt, feel free to kick that right-hand button and click subscribe on YouTube. Feel free to click the like button as many times as possible so we can share this wonderful content and knowledge throughout the entire world. The more likes we get, the more viral this content will go. If you want to learn more about me, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all social media platforms, as well as our upcoming courses. We'll be teaching commercial real estate around the world so you can build your own legacy in commercial real estate and obtain wealth. If you're interested in investing passively in commercial real estate, feel free to log on to our company website, alliancecgc.com. Feel free to look at our brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund. It's the #1 fund in the world that we are continuing to raise equity for, having tremendous success. James Pratt, thank you so much for spending a Saturday with me. What a treat. And it was great seeing you. And I wish you all the best and have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.